Thanks for listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I'm your host, Marina Buksov, and I'm a functional medicine pharmacist in New York. I'm also a clinical herbalist and an integrative health coach specializing in mindfulness and empowerment. I'm on a mission to transform the way we approach healthcare by bridging the wisdom of traditional medicine with modern practice. And in this podcast, I will be highlighting guests who do just that. I'm constantly inspired by them, and I know you will be as well. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, as always. Her name is Judy Koons, and she has been supporting individuals in coming back to true health mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually for decades. You'll find her using the freedom process with individuals choosing to end the war within and return to the magic of life. She brings new energy, simplicity, and clarity to some of the tougher concepts out there. If you are ready for greater mastery of self and to live by design, then she's ready to show up and point you in an amazing direction. So welcome to the show, Judy. She's the author of Spellbound No More, and I'm so excited to get into her story today.
Thank you, Marina, for having me today. It's great to be here. And I love what you're doing. I absolutely love what you're doing. One of my favorite things to help individuals do is come out of the regular care system and take ownership of this amazing technology that we cruise around in. And so I see you doing that, and I'm so thankful. Thank you very much for doing that.
Judy, thank you so much for your kind words and for appreciating my work. And really, people like you and guests that I have on and the listeners are the reason that I do this work. I was just reflecting on this today that, 7 seasons strong, we're going into 8th season right now. And this is one of the only medias that I've been able to be really consistent with, and it allows me to get to know amazing individuals and then allow the larger audience to also get to know you. So it's really a pleasure and an honor for me as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So Judy, I'd love to start with what I ask everybody here on the show, and that's really about your life growing up and how you came to do the work that you do today. That's a loaded question. So let's start at the beginning.
That's a lifetime question. It's like it's taken a lifetime to answer that. But I personally grew up in Northern Canada. I live in the US now, but there's a very different culture the further north you go on this continent anyway. And I grew up chronically ill, but there was not really anything alternative to work with, so I went through the whole healthcare system and symptom management oriented system. And by the time I was, 20 some years old, I had pretty much been frustrated. My symptoms weren't going away. They were just being chased through the body. And someone one day came to me and said, "You don't have to do it this way." But I didn't even realize that at the time, because that's what everybody did. That's what, we're all exposed to. So I was very curious, and it shifted the trajectory for me in a pretty intense way. I spent quite a bit of time training in the US and in Brazil when it came to the Rolfing, which is very deep myofascial release work. And I started there because my body misalignment was obvious and extremely painful. So I started there, but it led me in all sorts of directions, everything from psychology to studying religions to finding myself studying and diving deep into supplements and foods and health in every alternative way you could ever imagine. Fast forward a little while and I'm gaining. I'm actually gaining the mental diagnoses, the different pieces that I told I'd be living with for life are starting to dissipate. They're starting to shift. I'm starting to see changes. So I just kept going. I dove deep. I always say I went right to the rabbit hole and then I thought I was good, but then I realized there were a whole bunch of burrows to check into. So I checked into those too. But after a while, the pieced up model didn't fit. Like all this information that I was bringing in didn't fit into this physical, mental over here, emotional. I recognized that if I could fit this information into a holistic model, I had a greater chance of shifting my own experience. It wasn't that long before, friends and family were noticing that I was moving differently. I was living differently. I was showing up. Today, I can say that I'm predominantly symptom free and have been for many, many years. So I went from things like headaches 24/7, migraines 3 or 4 times a week, adult acne, seriously needing chiropractic and massage and rolfing weekly. And now there's none of that. It's like I live finally in a 20-year-old body instead of a 90-year-old body before my time, right? So, and I'm a bit past 20 at this point. So it's exciting to be able to live into that. But that's my story. And personally, it was, why would I have this information if I wasn't going to share it and I wasn't going to help other people get to that as well? I know we get kind of caught up in what's going on with us, and that becomes kind of a talking point for lots of us. So for me, it was about really recognizing how I could help individuals drop that chronic illness mindset. So again, my journeys have taken me into the mental, emotional, but not in a way where it's separate from the physical or the spiritual. So we're looking at bringing all that together and really rounding that out in how we get to show up on a daily basis. I did a lot of different trainings. Some of my favorites were the Rolfing training, again, in the US and Brazil. And then the School for the Work. I spent quite a bit of time with that as well, understanding how our thinking and our belief systems actually can really push in and cause us to experience some of the physical things that we do. And my somatics training. So I did quite a bit of somatics training, and that's all about the nature of movement in the physical body and how to move energy instead of it be caught in the system and create blockages. So those were some of my favorite trainings as I went through this process.
Wow, thank you so much for walking us through the steps that you took. And it reminds me of the saying, all roads lead to Rome, right? Like there's so many pathways into health or really into anything that we do. And we sometimes wonder, okay, like what's this alternative reality or parallel reality of me? What would she be doing? And what's the fastest way? I think a lot of people are plagued with, where's the destination, right? Just let me get there faster. Let me get the cure. Let me, feel better already. Why am I not at the good part yet? Let me skip ahead kind of mentality. But it seems like you're speaking to really exploring and allowing yourself to get trained in a multitude of modalities that led you to this point today. And I often see a lot of, especially female practitioners, they have so many trainings behind their name and so many different things that they're integrating, and it's really, really exciting. And I think also it makes me, it makes me think two things, right? So one is like, amazing, right? There's an amazing path and you're weaving it together in your own way. And then number two is like, well, is it really necessary to have like X number of degrees or letters after your name and all these trainings behind you? And like, where's this golden middle? So what's your take on that?
Well, that would be my take, is where is that center and what are you called to? So some individuals are very much called down that academic path that allows them to publish to be able to share with the rest of us. Others, you know, I always say choose your practitioner, but don't expect just because they're a practitioner that they're going to be able to provide you with the information and the support that you're looking for. It's a system as well. The systems cause us to believe that that's where the good is, the gold, what's going to serve us. But sometimes it actually locks us in and it stops us from looking within ourselves. Instead, we're giving our authority, giving our power to the system or the authority that we think is going to help us. My work is not about that. I don't think we need to have all of these different letters behind our names and all of these different trainings if we're willing to get the accumulation out of the way. So we're always having information come from us, through us, but there's this thing about being spellbound. I'm going to jump right into that because to me, it's the accumulation that's in the way that stops what's inside of you from being expressed. And the beliefs we pick up and adopt and put on, the ideas, the societal kind of directions that we're programmed or it's projected at us as this is the way to do it. I say, I don't know about that. I definitely am a rebel at heart because I am saying, are you sure? You know, I spent a lot of years down that path and I was still experiencing most of the symptoms that I started with. That doesn't make any sense to me. If I'm going to be working with information or working with support, I would think I would like to have some kind of obvious understanding about how it's helping me. It isn't just about being in a system. It isn't just about being in that cycle. It's literally about coming out of that cycle and knowing that if we bring the noise down, all that discomfort, all that chronic, all of those symptoms, there's actually information here that can be supportive to us in a way that's beyond having an outside support. And so for me, it's about helping others to maybe use foods that help to bring down the noise through symptoms. Let's bring down those noisy symptoms so that you can start having intimate conversation with this body, this being, and that has the ability to give you information that's much more efficient, much more effective, and in the direction that's really right for you. So I'm not opposed to systems in that there's some really beneficial places that they can be helpful. Like, please don't come to me if you have just been in a car accident like 10 minutes ago. I'm not that person. I haven't had that training. That's what the medical system is amazing for. I'm not going to prescribe because I'm all about the accumulation dropping away so that the health within you can express. I'm all about shifting the environment so your self-healing abilities can, skyrocket. It isn't about being healed anymore. We've moved into a completely different energy where healers are what? Guides. They're guides to show us how we actually have that health within us, how our self-healing is just needing some support. It just needs some space for it to be able to show up and do what it's designed to do for us, with us. That's my take on that whole system thing. I am very passionate about it too. I help a lot of people come out of the food system. We don't even realize how we are directed through that system and how food isn't necessarily what we think it is just because we've been told that's how we need to do it. So it's exciting to me because there's freedom in that. There's freedom. There's so much fun to be had. There's so much creativity. There's so much available to us if we're just not locked into these systems that we believe are the option or believe that that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that you're sharing. And I feel the same way about the food industry, the drug industry, the health industry. And there's a number of things that I want to ask you as a follow-up. So I think I'll start with your path, right? Where we were talking about, do you need all the degrees, and which way you learn, like which sequence, right, was it? And what's sometimes people want to know what's the right sequence, what's the best sequence, right? And for me, I actually had a carefully laid plan that I was going to go to pharmacy school. And then after I graduated, that's when I started really questioning everything, and my own health deteriorated. And I don't think those two things are unrelated. I think they're very much in sync. And so that's what led me down my path the other way. So I was in academia, I was in the allied health profession system, and then I sort of followed the breadcrumbs out. And I think what you're sharing with your journey, which I don't think is unique either, where you follow your unique health and your own needs first, and then you discover that once you help yourself, you can help others. And I think a lot of people turn to alternative methods exactly for this reason, because the conventional model is not helping them or is not solving their problems, or sometimes causing harm from the way that they're approaching the situation, which I found personally as well. And so I think we've lost like this mentorship and apprenticeship model nowadays, where we just want everybody to go through schooling and get the degree and be on the same page, which again, there is merit in that. And then also there's a loss of when you're not actually following a guidance that actually works. You're not following like a system in real time in practice that actually works. And we do have things like that. Like I had rotations at school and we have internships, but I really truly believe that the hands-on internships should be so much more prevalent and prominent, and it will get you up to speed so much more than just didactic, abstract everything.
That's what you do. You support individuals to come into something very usable. So I completely agree. It's what I do as well. When it comes to the facilitators that I work with, we're hands-on right to begin with so that they have support. And that means that from all the degrees and all the trainings and all of the work that I've done, because I started down the path similar to you, but I turned more quickly. I started down, I was headed for medical doctor. And I was almost to start pre-med. And it was like, what am I doing? Like, this isn't working. And so I completely shifted. And you're right, I was my first client. And all the golden threads out of everything that I've done have allowed for, I have clients all over the world that are literally no longer giving their power away to chronic health. They're no longer giving their power away to practitioners outside of themselves, because my job is to work myself out of a job. It's to allow others to hear themselves so that they know what's right for them, what their bodies are asking for, what direction to go. And so we get to come back to that mentorship. We get back to that apprenticeship, which is, hey, life. You're going to have clients, and I want you to be working with them as quickly as you have enough confidence and knowledge behind you. But I want to be there beside you. I want to walk beside you so that I can support you to work out those pieces that you cannot find in a book. You just cannot. It's putting your hands on and understanding the feel of, say, if you were gifted in pottery, everyone knows that you have to get your hands on to know what that's going to become. So it's just like this with facilitators or practitioners or coaches or whatever. How do we come into that understanding about what's really going to help individuals get to their own results? I'm all about that. I love it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it reminds me too of what you mentioned about like the doctor as an authority figure model versus the coach, the mentor, the guide model. And I really think that that's why there's such a huge boom right now in the coaching space and the wellness space, with so many coaches coming up and sharing their different unique magic and modalities, because there's really this desire from the collective right now to be their own healer, right? To unlock their own inner magic. And that's going to require the experience hands-on stuff. And it's really nice to have that mentor that's like a loving parent and not like this authority, like police that's going to just govern you and take away that self-governance and that autonomy from you. And it sort of creates this victim and oppressor mentality. And I think it's really, really great to see that people are stepping up and sharing their gifts in this way and creating these spaces where people can facilitate their own healing and be empowered. And again, shift the paradigm from treating disease to unlocking your own wellness. And a lot of the traditional medicines that I've studied also do the same thing. Whether we talk about chi energy or meridians or prana, or we call different things. And there's also quantum physics that has a lot to say. And there's also the ancient magic practices and manifesting that everybody's talking about, right? Like we're all kind of speaking different terminologies, but we're talking about the same thing, where you get to come online and be your authentic self and actually live the life you want, rather than dealing with illness and, as a step that's preventing you from going out and living.
No more of that, right? I come at it a little differently in that I'm also not about overlays. So you know how sometimes you have something going on that's extremely uncomfortable and you look for a way to manage those symptoms. I am not about that. I'm like, let's get to the root cause. You're like that too. I know, I've watched you. You get to the root cause so that you're not just putting a Band-Aid on something that totally, completely has the ability to heal itself, as long as you keep the environment correct for that. So I don't want to put a Band-Aid on an individual. I encourage them not to put Band-Aids on themselves either, even though I'm very much about, we know how to distract ourselves when there's a lot of detox happening or there's a lot of shifts happening in our lives. I get that. But if you're really called to express the amount of potential that you have the capacity for, then it's about getting to what's already there. So if we want to come to freedom, it isn't about going out and pushing our way into freedom. It's about dropping in and recognizing freedom is already there. There's just some things in the way. And I use the analogy of, those lead blankets that we wear at the dentist when they're doing x-rays of the teeth. Imagine that the overlays are these whole body lead suits. They're super heavy, they're cumbersome, they're all of that. And most of us are trying to move through life with like 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 or 12 of those on. And that's the accumulation. That's the spellbinding. That's what stops us from being able to express what's here within us. So dropping in and understanding what the root cause is how we create space so that those lead suits can drop away. And then pretty soon I am floating through life instead of dragging myself through life, trying to find somebody to help me manage with these suits. Like, I really don't want someone to come along and go, oh, well, here's a carry-on that you can put all those suits in, but, oh, it's locked to your arm and you have to keep carrying them even if you're not fully wearing them. So how do we even connect with ourselves when we have all of this accumulation we're carrying around? And then especially, how do we relate to others? You have all your suits, I have all my suits, let's hug. Well, we can't, because we're this far away from one another with all of this accumulation energetically between us. How do we communicate? Well, I don't know about you, but if I was trying to communicate through 3 or 4 of those lead blankets at the dentist. Ooh, okay, so fun.
That's a cool effect.
I've never seen that before. But if I was trying to even see through that or speak through that, those lead blankets, how can I? They stop me from fully expressing my potential or even recognizing the potential within me. So that freedom and that power that is already within, I'm so much about supporting individuals to get all that accumulation out of the way, all the spell binding out of the way so that they can express fully into life. Why not? I don't really think we're here just to wake up, do what we do, go to sleep. Let's have a little more, I don't know, meaning maybe, but meaning's not the right word for me because I find meaning ends up being most of the accumulation. So maybe it's more about the freedom to express in all of these different ways, like the whole range that's available to us instead of having this limited range because of all the accumulation that's in the way of our potential. It's exciting. I watch how individuals open up and artists, they pull that, unfinished art out of the closet and all of a sudden they have all this energy and all this inspiration and it's coming from within. They're not having to go find it. They're not having to seek to do any of this. And they're finishing their art and they're finding there's so much more. Pretty soon it's just one art piece after the other. I'm finding moms that they're able to support their families in having a really strong foundational environment so that their kids aren't coming into chronic illness, so that they're able to reverse their chronic illness. So they're reversing their aging. I find elderly individuals that thought they were done moving in life. They've become very sedentary. And now all of a sudden they start working with the somatics and they start creating space for that accumulation to drop away. And they're hiking and climbing mountains again. So, of course, if you are carrying around so much weight in energetic, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical weight, how are you going to prevent your body from wearing out? It doesn't matter that it's not physical weight. It still affects these bodies the same way. So I'm excited to watch that every single day. Business owners, business individuals that are authors that are coming out with their messages because they have gotten out of their own way. They've just created space so that nature can reorganize all of this and they're available to be able to share their message or their song or their music or their, whatever it is that's core to them, that they're being called to.
Yeah, I love that. So, Judy, I imagine there is a lot of individualization in your work, but I'd love to hear if you have a process that you take most individuals through as far as is there a sequence, an order to the events of taking them through this physical, spiritual, and mental evolution?
Yes, is. And the one thing that everybody has is their body and their breath. So we do spend time bringing food back to nature and helping individuals to use the signatures that are available in foods, like the energies that are in foods, to help them release the distortions in the physical body. But our main thing that we share these days is the breath, because everyone has that. But very few of us are actually using that technology to any degree. So when we're breathing, our ribs are actually meant to come out and up just a tiny bit to the sides. Not necessarily all this front breathing that most of us do, or the holding of breath that a lot of us do at different times, but this multi-dimensional somatic movement of breath, breathing into your sides, it automatically engages all of the other systems in your body. Your heart is connected, through the tissues. There's tissue from your diaphragm up around your heart that helps your heart to do its work. The lymph system is affected by the diaphragm, by this somatic breath out into the sides. Your lymph system, your digestive system, your nervous system, every system in the body is upgraded. That's all we need. That's a fact. I'm not sure where it's coming from. I'll have to quit putting both thumbs up at the same time, but it's exciting too, because to really come into your breath is to come into freedom. It's like we say the breath is the doorway back to yourself, back to your potential. And it is what helps us create space so the accumulation can drop away. But if you try it, when you are working with your breath and you breathe out into the sides, to begin with, lots of times there's not a lot of movement. And so you're breathing out in the sides and you have to actually push. Like most people need to put their hands at the side so they can meet their hands. They have some reference. But after you do that for a while, the living practice comes into, body remembering how it works most efficiently. As soon as we come into the sides, and we actually get movement again, all the way up from the top to the bottom of the ribs. And then the movement extends down into the hips, down into the legs, to the toes, up into the neck and the head. And that gets, it gets circulation going. There's no other way to say it. But it also helps to recalibrate the cranial sacral rhythm. So we have this rhythm, this movement of fluids and energy that goes up and down the spine and around the brain. And as soon as we breathe the way we're designed to, that happens and the primal pieces drop out of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So now you're actually coming from a place where you're not being controlled by fear. And most of us are. Our adrenals are shot because life is so busy, and there's always a degree of fight or flight or fight that you're in. So as soon as you come into this breath, you come out of that. Now you're back into source flow, back into source creativity. So using this breath can help us come out of the patterning that comes from being in fight, flight, or freeze all the time. And now what? We end up asking ourselves, now what? Because we're peaceful and we're not used to being in that. But there's so much, there's a lot of science coming out that lets us know that this cranial sacral rhythm actually affects some of the deepest structures in the brain and causes a lot of chi energy to be active. Kundalini yoga is another perfect example of how they work with that energy rising through that spine. I look at the spine as an antenna. It's a receiver and a transmitter. I want my receiver and transmitter to be working really well. I want it to be regulated. I do not want to be in a dysregulated body where my nervous system is causing me to have to hide out in the dark because everything is too much, or this triggers that and I'm off and running for a few days. So just using the breath, which everybody has, is a foundational piece of how we help others come into this true health that is across the board. You can't separate physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual out. They all weave in together. They're not these, four pieces of a pie chart. They're just not. So we work with the breath and it ends up showing us results in all of those aspects of self. And from that place, we're still going to hear what we need for herbs. We're still going to hear what we need for supplements or for foods that are going to support this body. Exciting to me. Let's do it. I want to know because that's where the individuality comes in. Some individuals are super sensitive. Some individuals aren't inclined to supplements. Some are more inclined to herbs or vice versa. Other individuals, they don't have the same body alignment structurally that allows them to work with some of the pieces we talk about. But the somatics is very much about the movement of nature. So old injuries, they don't have to be maintained. We don't have to manage those symptoms. We can actually allow those old energies, which are just an energetic distortion, to move again so that there's actually full healing happening through the self-healing mechanisms. So we go into it physically, we do go into it mentally, emotionally, and we do go into it to some degree through lifestyle, but it's about simplifying. Because if you just used your breath, over time, the body would take that and run with it, and it would give you direction. And we don't know what that's going to be all the time. But my experience is that it gives us direction. It doesn't matter who it is, if we just start with the breath. But I'm not very patient. I like to work with the shifting of the environment, not wait for that to happen. Because essentially the energy, when we talk about quantum physics, the energy comes in and it is always calling to the distortions, bringing the distortions back into alignment. And I love that. I'm not willing to wait for it to happen. If it's going to take 10 years, no, I'm going to decrease that by many, many, many years because I'm going to work with it. But what do I need to do? The distortion is there because I'm doing war with myself in the first place. So if I can recognize where the war is, then this distortion can be called back into the original energies so quickly because I'm not in the way of that happening. So we create space, the accumulation drops away, nature, which we are, reorganizes us, and pretty soon those distortions are collapsing one after the other so quickly that it's like, wow, I had no idea life could be this fun and this magical and this oriented and this focused and this loving. It's across the board what the potential can be for all of us.
Yeah, I love that. So Judy, for people that are listening and they might be interested to see if maybe you can help them. A lot of people now know diagnoses, right? So could you give us an idea of what type of diagnoses that you work with, what type of clients you generally work with, and maybe what's the most challenging cases, maybe giving an example of that?
Some of the most challenging cases are autoimmune diseases. Probably the most challenging is when there is more than one autoimmune case presented. I don't really work with that. I don't love labels. If there's multiple autoimmune diagnoses, I know that there's a lot more accumulation going on than say for just one or for something that isn't considered an autoimmune. I'm not okay with the idea of autoimmune, although now there's been some things happen that can actually show up as a true autoimmune. For the most part, everything that I've ever worked with, it can be turned around by just shifting the environment. So I can't think of something that I haven't worked with. We end up working with a lot of mental illness diagnoses these days alongside of the systems. We're not trying to say you can't do that, you only have to do this. I'm saying do this to release the accumulation and recognize that this diagnosis has the ability to shift. It isn't something you necessarily have to work with for life or that you have to work really hard to manage those symptoms. So for me, it's across the board. Some of my favorites, I had a young woman come to me and she says, I think I have MS. And I was like, okay, have you had any diagnosis happen? She's like, I'm really afraid of going down that road because if I go into the system, will I ever find my way back out? I said, well, I need you to know that I'm not an emergency provider, but we can immediately today start shifting the environment and you can track that. And then you have the medical system to back you up and let's see what happens. I have hundreds of examples of that, of just MS alone, whether it's being diagnosed or it hasn't been diagnosed. And pretty soon she went from really being afraid of life and not being able to function to traveling the world, having babies, feeling completely energized to be able to have those babies and parent to her greatest potential. At this point, her whole life is about her children, and she still takes time to do what she loves to do, fulfill her passion, because she has that much energy now. Nothing's holding her back. And it's not like I did anything other than help her recognize how to shift her environment. She had to do the hard work. I get the good end of this deal, I think. But at the same time, the information doesn't have to be so difficult to work with, because as long as you're putting into a holistic model, it's going to be more efficient and effective, and you get to recognize what's extraneous really quickly. So, oh, this is right for me. This is right for me. And I get to support them in that. I'm extremely kinesthetic as well, which means that intuitively, I feel most things in my body if I'm checking in. I've had to learn how to handle that, because at one point it was like I had 100 radio stations going off all the time through my body. And now I can be much more selective with that. But it helps me to support others to connect just that much more deeply in what's happening for them, so that we can streamline the path a bit better. And I'm all about bringing up discomfort. So if you've got fears and you want to come play with us, because I do work with the team, recognize that we are going to help you bring up the discomforts so that you can get that energy moving, so that you can shift your environment. And pretty soon life is just easier. It can become effortless. Honestly, that's the magic of it. It can become effortless. So we're here, but we're going to bring up those discomforts, and we're going to help you find them so that you know what's at the root of what you're dealing with.
Yeah. I'm going to quote one of my other guests who said, you have to feel it to heal it. And I think it's a common saying, but I love that. And I absolutely loved what you had to share with us today, Judy, and your holistic perspective, as well as how humble you are. And I would love to do a rapid fire round of questions with you if you have a few minutes left.
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, so question number one, what's the number one thing that anybody can do right now to improve their quality of life?
Breathe into the sides of your body. Even if you don't know all the details, or even if you aren't sure if you're doing it right, if you get the breath moving into the sides of your body is going to take that and run with it. Because your body's always coming from homeostasis, and it wants to be as efficient and effective as possible. So number one, breathe into the sides of your body. I have to sneak this one in though. Water, living water. So water that's bioelectrically alive, not alkalinized, not buzzed with a whole bunch of electricity, but literally a little bit of fresh lemon or lime juice, some blackberries, blueberries, raspberries mushed up in the water to bring the water back to life. Hopefully start with a pretty decent water in the first place that doesn't have a whole bunch of, in it. But those are the two basic pieces that can simplify and can start you going in another direction. It seems too simple, right? But often the most simple is the most profound way to get yourself to where you want to be.
Yeah, that's the other thing I love about your approach, the simplicity that can scale, right? We learned that in business, and it's absolutely true for health. The more simple you can keep a routine, the more likely that you can stick to it, and it's actually going to make a difference for you. So question number two, what would be your advice to somebody that is going through their healing journey now, or maybe even looking to help others through their healing? What would be something that you could tell them based on your experience?
You're your first practitioner, or you're your first client, you're your first coaching client, you're your first. What helped you? And then expand it out, because of course everybody's going to be individual. But if you're really wanting to help, how can you evoke from others? Not teach to others, but how can you evoke from others? And when I'm teaching practitioners, or I'm teaching, look at that, teaching. When I'm working with practitioners, when I'm working with facilitators, I'm always looking to evoke what's most available, what's most inside of them, because what's inside of them is holistic. We bring it out here into the mind and it starts getting all pieced up. But how can you bring it into your body? And how can you come from that evoking? Even if it's somebody, you're mentoring someone with business, how can you evoke from them what their best business model is going to be for their personality versus, push your business model onto them? I was really successful with this, so you will be, well, not necessarily. Their personality, the way that they approach life might be different. So that evoking is number one in everything that I do.
Wow. I definitely want to talk to you about that, but let's save that for another time. Okay, number 3, what's a fun fact about yourself or a hobby that you enjoy?
Well, I spent a lot of my life being a professional natural horse trainer. So I've spent many, many years out in the sun, in the round corral, or out in nature. I love to ride my horses at liberty. And when I'm not doing that, you're going to find me sitting with the bees that I tend. They're not my bees, but I support them. So those are me. I'm very much about nature.
Yeah, so lovely to hear that. And Judy, I would love for you to share with the listeners how they can get in touch with you, how they can learn more about your book, and how you work with clients, right? So if somebody is reaching out, what are the offerings you currently have?
Okay, so everyone can find me at daur.co. Okay, that is the entry point for everyone. We have a free complimentary membership where you can find all the somatic moves that I'm talking about. You can find the freedom process work. We do freedom process complimentary every 2 weeks in a group format. I do freedom talks to help with misaligned thinking, break that up and shift the paradigm. I became so busy one-on-one that I started working with groups because that allowed more individuals to have access to the evoking that was happening for them, the frequency that we were playing with. So the book Spellbound No More is my way of saying, in this written form, this is your one-on-one session with me. So the book is designed to be literally a session. And when you get into that, and it's on Amazon, it's available. By the time you see this, it will be available in probably ebook, book, and audio form. And I'm willing to say that if you just start breathing into your sides and you read it, the frequency is there to help you start already shifting back to self. That's the best way for individuals to find me or to work with me. I work with the team now, so we also have some other individuals that are completely in alignment with what I'm sharing that do facilitation for the freedom process one-on-one. There's a couple of individuals that do it in a group format, and then there's a couple of individuals that help you come back to nature with food. But all of that's available inside of the complimentary membership, whether it's something that we offer complimentary or something that we offer by a minimum donation. We try to do that as much as possible so that it's available for everyone. If you're really not sure about jumping into a membership, I know there's so many memberships out there these days. You can find more of what I do on YouTube. Look up Judy Koons or The Doorway. You can find us on Instagram at The Doorway, DAUR. I know it's pronounced different, but Door is exciting to me. When I was approached with that by an individual that helped us bring all the pieces together. Door is an early old Irish word for oak tree. And there's a legend that says, if you travel like you walk around the oak tree, that you'll recognize healing. Now, there's special oak trees for this, but walking around that oak tree seems like that's yours to do. That leaves you sovereign. That allows you to recognize the health and the wealth and the power that you already are versus trying to get it from someone or hoping someone else will bring it to you. And the oak tree to me represents, it doesn't matter how how deep that seed, that source seed within you is, it's always there. We shift the environment and that can grow. And think about an oak tree. They're huge and they come from this tiny, tiny little acorn. So to me, that's what it is. It helps bring us all together into this ecosystem where we get to help one another, and the energy of what we're doing lifts us all up. But there's nothing more than a little friendly competition running down the beach and maybe tumbling, at the finish line. It doesn't really matter. We're lifting one another all at the same time. So that's where you can find me, and that's how I work.
Wow. Well, I love that story and the ideology behind that. Of course, as an herbalist, I really appreciate that. And then also the play on words, because it sounds like door or like a doorway through, right? Like a portal. So that's really, really exciting. And it's been so fun chatting with you and getting to know you. And I'm looking forward to grabbing a copy of your book and going to check out your membership and materials. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom, Judy.
Thank you, Marina, for having me and bringing all of this forth, because you do that. I see you do that with others all the time. And it's wonderful to be able to have a way to bring this information forth that's fun. So thank you.
Thanks. All right. Well, have a great week ahead, Judy.
Yes, you too.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast, and I truly hope you enjoyed the show. If you learned something useful in this episode, please consider giving the show a 5-star rating and a sincere review so that more people can find it, or share it with a friend directly. To get in touch with me, you can find me on social media by looking up my name, Marina Buksov, or email me at marina@rawfork.com. Take good care and see you soon.